Imagine this. There's another version of you, secretly existing in a hidden dimension just beyond your everyday awareness. It's not some distant cosmic stranger. It's literally another you constantly interacting with your thoughts, emotions, and desires. This quantum double is like a parallel reflection that can influence your path in life if you know how to tap into it. Sound unbelievable? That's exactly why it's so powerful. Most people have no clue it exists. Think of it as a best friend who sees every dream you have and every worry you hide. It's always whispering back messages, handing you hints about where your life could go next. When you feel that sudden flash of inspiration or that random gut feeling, it might not be so random after all. It could be your quantum double trying to guide you toward the future you secretly crave. Why does it matter? Because this double can help you rewrite your destiny. When you realize there's a parallel you storing all your hidden potential, you gain the ultimate edge. Instead of drifting through life, you start to co-create your experiences. By aligning your thoughts, you send the perfect signal for your double to bring those potentials into your reality. Once you grasp this, you'll never see your life or your own mind the same way again.
It's unsettling to realize that many popular beliefs about the mind may be outdated or even hinder human growth. Much of the public tends to trust superficial versions of the so-called law of attraction, without considering the possibility that a much more complex mechanism exists, one that goes beyond the idea of simply attracting favorable circumstances. When studying the quantum double and time unfolding, as physicist Jean-Pierre Garnier-Mallet proposed, a new horizon emerges that can shake deeply rooted conceptions about how reality works. People frequently believe in the power of thoughts, although almost no one understands how invasive and systemic it can become. According to the predominant mentality, simply repeating positive expressions would be enough to solve any blockage. However, disconnected events and disappointing results indicate the limitation of this view. Could the famous mantra, "Thought creates reality," be only part of the story? Garnier-Mallet's approach suggests that there is a much broader and intricate set of laws governing the creation of possibilities, in which attraction is just one of the elements, coexisting with something called internal control of potentials. The concept of time unfolding proposes that each person carries an expanded form of consciousness, the quantum double, connected to a universe of information beyond the common boundaries of time and space. It's a proposal that challenges the postulates of the most orthodox religions and also questions conventional science. According to Garnier-Mallet himself, this is not unfounded mysticism. He argues that particles, including those that make up our brain, maintain cooperation with an extensive field of information. Each thought would be an impulse that crosses barriers and influences other minds, generating a collective flow of potentials. Many ancient writings, when stating something similar to "Thy will be done," received religious interpretations that underestimate the real strength of this statement. From the perspective of the quantum double, will does not consist of an abstract desire, but an energy that can be captured by those who are in resonance with the same field. This discovery raises a crucial reflection. If each thought travels and impacts the collective, what about the responsibility of each sender? Wouldn't it be naive to consider the simple formulation of ideas an act exempt from consequences, since fears or hopes can reverberate in everyone? In Garnier-Mallet's presentations, the biggest challenge is not attracting good things, but managing what is projected at each moment. Any fear or doubt, however small it may seem, represents a focus of distortion that sabotages the potentials that someone is trying to create. In other words, a mind unable to watch its internal flow contaminates not only itself, but also its surroundings. This point creates controversy by confronting the culture that promotes large movements of prayer or collective thought, believing that the union of many minds is infallible for for generating positive effects. According to the time unfolding proposal, the greater the number of people involved without proper internal cleansing, the more confusion and unwanted consequences tend to occur. Why isn't this concept of double and unfolding widely publicized if, in theory, it would explain prophecies, intuitions, and even sudden inspirations? Ancient cultures already left clues about an individual portion that goes beyond the physical body, although historical records are disconnected and receive varied nomenclatures. Some prefer to keep this knowledge restricted to a few, possibly fearing the impact that such ideas might generate in a world that values traditional and predictable parameters. It does no good to passively receive speeches that exalt positive thinking or good vibes without understanding the collective magnitude of each fear or limiting belief. Throughout this video, the proposal is to unveil the historical roots, theoretical bases, and practical applications that give each individual, including whoever is watching now, the opportunity to take command of their own mental potentials. The well-known phrase, "thought creates realities," takes on a distinct contour when illuminated by the logic of the quantum double, shocking those who remained within the classical paradigm. To understand where the concept of the quantum double comes from, it is useful to revisit the historical formation that, in many official readings, is omitted or reduced to curiosities. Researchers outside conventional circles point out that ancient civilizations, such as Sumerians, Egyptians, and Eastern traditions, already worked with the idea of a second consciousness or duplicated presence in each being. These are fragmented references, but revealing rites of passage or healing ceremonies spoke of something that escaped the physical limit and assumed a significant role in the soul's journey. Such fragments, in light of the time unfolding hypothesis, would indicate that these ancient peoples had an intuitive understanding of what we now call the quantum double. Medieval records also mention similar phenomena, described as astral mirrors, or states in which monks and hermits reported being in several places simultaneously. These testimonies were almost always relegated to the condition of myths or mystical exaggerations. Curiously, even in these ancient texts, there is a concern about distinguishing such occurrences from witchcraft, treating them as genuine experiences of a parallel instance of consciousness. It is not surprising that, at the time, religious and political institutions reacted with caution or repression, trying to fit the phenomenon into dogmas or dismissing it as delirium. Only in recent decades, with advances in modern physics and neuroscience, has a crack opened to reinterpret such remote accounts without so much prejudice. When Jean-Pierre Garnier-Mallet postulated the existence of a double that acts outside the common timeline, there were various reactions. On one side, disbelief and accusations of charlatanism. On the other, curiosity in sectors that study boundaries between consciousness and quantum mechanics. For Garnier-Mallet, dealing with the quantum double is just extending existing physical principles if we analyze them from the perspective of quantum potentials. In his explanations, the brain does not create reality alone, but processes data that emerges continuously and non-locally. This approach by itself refers to the accounts of prophets, sages, and mystics who in past times received revelations without the support of any technology. It is worth noting that different creeds or schools of mystery denominate this parallel reality in various ways. Some speak of divine perception. Others prefer the label superior spiritual vision. Garnier-Mallet's point is based on the notion that time does not follow an invariable and linear flow, but occurs in phases of unfolding, opening possibilities for exchanges between the main consciousness and its quantum counterpart. This is where explanations come in for quick intuitions, decisions considered miraculous, and anticipations of events that surpass common sense. Before a wider audience, the inevitable question arises: if this line of reasoning explains so many historical and cultural episodes, why isn't it emphasized in academic circles? Is there a barrier from scientists who rely on a materialist paradigm, reluctant to expand the pillars of knowledge? Or would there be another type of obstacle, possibly motivated by the fear that this new paradigm would subvert social hierarchies and consolidated beliefs? Such questions fuel conspiracy theories that see in time unfolding a rupture of large proportions. It is clear that the demand for empirical evidence is not trivial. Science, in general, requires reproducible experiments and precise metrics, and so far there are few robust investigations in this regard. Garnier Mallet himself recognizes that he does not intend to invalidate conventional physics, but to complement it, bringing a richer understanding of the role of time and consciousness in phenomena, often labeled as superstition or coincidence. This generates intense debates in laboratories and universities. Some researchers see the proposal as innovative, others claim absence of measurable evidence. Despite the disagreements, a relevant fact is that ancient traditions asked followers for a constant vigilance of thoughts and inner purification. Doctrines of yoga and Buddhism, for example, spoke of a collective mental field centuries before the notion of a quantum field emerged. In light of the quantum double, such ancient practices can be interpreted as attempts to calibrate one's own flow of information to harmonize with favorable potentials rather than generating disturbances. Thus, points of convergence between ancestral spirituality and contemporary scientific theories are revealed. In summary, the historical foundation of the quantum double does not arise from an isolated source, but from a mosaic where religion, philosophy, science, and personal experiences intertwine. Those who look with disdain at these signs, attributing everything to mere coincidences, may ignore the possibility that ancient civilizations had already perceived subtle aspects of reality that only now modern science begins to explore systematically. The suggestion, therefore, is that human beings participate in a much more vast informational system than we imagine, in which each intention, fear, or flash of consciousness produces real consequences. This video, then, is not limited to a panorama that contests linear time. It proposes to review the notion of individual mind as something closed and independent from the external world. By revisiting historical documents, spiritual traditions, and recent scientific research, the perspective emerges that the quantum double, despite being controversial, may be a coherent explanation for phenomena that escape conventional understanding. The question that remains is whether human knowledge, taught over the centuries, reflects a reliable totality, or if there are still hidden layers waiting to be rediscovered. The so-called quantum double represents the most intense focus of the time-unfolding proposal. The idea is simple to state, yet profound in implications. Each individual would have immediate access to a part of themselves that moves in informational domains outside common temporal limitations. Although it seems like science fiction, some claim that this mechanism is actually responsible for the internal processes of capturing and transmitting data that allow us not only to interpret reality, but also to design new paths. In general terms, nothing is created in isolation within the brain. It would function as a receiver that translates information previously existing in the quantum field where all potentials reside. Within this logic, the quantum double is a subtle yet active instance that collects content and delivers it to our everyday consciousness. There are spiritualist currents that use terms such as higher self or inner guide. Garnier Mallet's contribution, is to reinforce that this is not a matter of belief, but a physical foundation still little known, whose official recognition faces resistance in academic science. In Garnier Mallet's writings, mental vigilance is fundamental to maintain contact with the double. Each thought generates something that goes beyond the individual boundary and becomes accessible to the collectivity, as long as there is tuning in the reception frequency. Instead of attracting facts and circumstances, as is popularly said, the time unfolding proposal suggests managing the flow of mental impulses. In other words, responsibility is not restricted to having good thoughts, but to ensuring that they are coherent enough not to suffer external interference, nor to feed internal contradictions. The double would also not send just unilateral messages. Whenever someone formulates an idea, whether of joy, grudge, or uncertainty, it penetrates the common field. Consequently, anyone who resonates with that vibration can capture and amplify that impulse. Hence, fear and hesitation generate negative waves that add up to those of other people, creating an informational snowball. When doubts inhabit the mind of someone trying to materialize something, the double finds itself trapped in tensions and cannot act clearly. It's as if the engine that drives creation gets stuck in conflicts. It is not uncommon to hear accounts of people who experience extraordinary coincidences when dedicating themselves to mental focusing practices. These are situations in which events seem to fit perfectly, almost like a response to a mental request. Many call this luck or coincidence. From the quantum double perspective, there would be a plausible explanation. The quantum counterpart accesses external information and warns the main consciousness about opportunities that would normally go unnoticed. In this sense, it would not be a matter of manipulating reality at will, but of refining internal perception to recognize open paths. Some proponents of this approach warn that it is not enough to want something intensely, believing in an immediate result. The key factor would be in internal coherence, without dispersion or hidden fears, so that the double acts without blockages. Contrary to the simplistic portrait that you create everything you desire, a more sober view emerges. There are multiple influences and variables, but the person becomes a co-creator by tuning in, being able to embrace new paths within the network of possibilities. It is inevitable to notice a parallel with certain religious doctrines that preach, "Thy will be done." Traditional interpretations have often reduced this to an act of submission or a vague desire with no real effect. From the time unfolding perspective, this passage would relate to a natural law. When the will is clean of insecurities, it aligns with what already exists as potential in the great field. Such an idea contradicts fixed religious structures, as it suggests that we do not need intermediaries to exercise this creative force. In Garnier Mallet's view, well-oriented will does not collide with what we call divine will. On the contrary, it expresses a very objective channel of manifestation. Another point raised is the risk of mental manipulation. If all minds interact in the same field, couldn't someone try to directly influence another person to gain advantages? Defenders of the quantum double recognize this danger, but emphasize that whoever takes such an attitude also assumes the negative developments, because emitting invasive thoughts creates a misaligned potential, prone to generate unpleasant return for the sender himself. In interviews, Garnier Mallet comments that dominating or converting another's thought results in an energetic conflict that harms all involved. For those who believe in the strength of large groups united in prayer or meditation, the unfolding perspective sounds disconcerting. While not denying the relevance of collective convergence, it emphasizes that if people do not clean up doubts and fears, they may add disjointed vibrations. Then, instead of full union, the result becomes a psychic patchwork, making the collective goal diffuse. Rather than refuting the power of the collective, the idea is to refine the inner quality of each participant before any collective practice. In summary, the quantum double confronts basic points of simplified views about spirituality and personal development. It indicates that there is a level of individual responsibility greater than was commonly supposed, and that it is not enough to visualize desires without consistency. It is necessary to deal with internal contradictions, remove limiting beliefs, observe deep-rooted fears, and expand the notion that our thoughts, on a large scale, reach a collective fabric. It is no wonder that this proposal generates both fascination and discomfort. Fascination because it promises an amplitude of unexplored capabilities. Discomfort because it demands self-criticism and honesty. Instead of merely memorizing concepts or praying in the hope of divine concessions, this approach leads the individual to recognize that each thought launches potentials into the world. If such potentials collide with stored fears, there is not enough harmony for something to materialize. This demands courage to face internal inconsistencies and stop the incessant search for external culprits, be they deities, governments, or circumstances. The call that the quantum double makes is for mental and emotional autonomy, something that bothers both skeptical materialists and adherents of more dogmatic faiths. Finally, the big question remains: is each one ready to deal with the weight of their own capacity for creation without crutches and without manipulations? Many come to the quantum double seeking clear evidence of its application in daily life. Even if there is an instigating theoretical framework, what really arouses interest is verifying whether these ideas can, in fact, transform practical problems or bring unusual solutions. The eagerness for immediate results, however, usually reveals the most glaring misunderstandings about time unfolding, as it is not about instant magic, but a method that includes internal realignment and permanent mental vigilance. Among the most discussed examples is the practice of correcting potentials before sleeping. Garnier Mallet describes that, in nighttime rest, consciousness stops receiving the incessant bombardment of stimuli, which opens space for the double to reorganize poorly formulated thoughts during the day. The procedure is relatively simple. The person, shortly before falling asleep, mentally reviews situations that brought regret or discomfort and then, internally, dialogues with the double, expressing the desire to reorient those potentials. It is not an annulment of errors, but a request for rearrangement of the information that is available in the field. Many claim to perceive effects in their behavior or in the unfolding of facts, although they emphasize that everything depends on the conviction and sincerity of this nocturnal adjustment. 3 elements are repeatedly cited in this process: will, uncertainty, and fear. Garnier Mallet states that they are essential forces for success or failure in connecting with the double. The will functions as the engine of thought, the arrow that defines what one wants to create or experience. If there is no clarity at this point, the results become diffuse. Uncertainty acts as a barrier that stalls the flow, launching contradictory signals. When someone longs for something, but secretly doubts their own ability, or thinks that nothing will work out, they end up building a confused potential. Fear is seen as a psychic poison that makes almost everything unfeasible, as it not only limits conscious creation, but also propagates in the collective mind. In these circumstances, stories are common of people who had strong intentions, but who didn't get anywhere because they were dominated by the fear of failing. There is also the debate around the manipulation of others' thoughts. In circles that study time unfolding, intrusion into another person's mind is seen as an invasion of psychic boundaries, generating consequences for those who try this abusive control. The logic is clear. By emitting a distorted potential, aiming to harm or dominate the other, the sender also gets stuck in that distortion, receiving the effects back. The repetition of this warning seems to accompany spiritual teachings from various cultures, which for centuries have spoken of the return of any act of aggression, be it physical or mental. The subject also raises reflection on groups that unite with supposedly noble objectives, such as large chains of prayer or thought focused on world peace. Through the lens of the quantum double, the validity of these initiatives depends less on the number of participants and more on the internal cleanliness of each one. If the majority carries traumas, negativity, or disguised ambition, the result can be a web of impulses that cancel each other out or even aggravate states of confusion. With this, the popular belief that the more people, the better is questioned. It may be preferable to have few people really align with a beneficial intention than multitudes flooded with contradictions. Individual responsibility gains relevance at this point, connecting to other theories that associate thoughts with forming informational fields. For example, Rupert Sheldrake's concept of morphic fields. Although Garnier Mallet does not use this same name, there are similarities in the idea that a repetition of mental patterns, whether positive or negative, can shape behaviors on a collective scale. In such scenarios, the concern with fear is justified because harmful emotions spread rapidly, locking constructive actions and paralyzing collective creativity. It becomes clear that the quantum double proposal requires more than self-help formulas. It is not enough to recite mantras or prayers and expect immediate miracles. The real work is in internal restructuring, examining limiting beliefs, appeasing insecurities, and learning to direct the will firmly. Some report transformative experiences when adopting this mental discipline, mentioning sudden solutions to impasses, impressive synchronicities, and even strokes of luck that they cannot explain by conventional methods. On the other hand, Garnier Mallet himself insists on differentiating enhanced perception from mystical fanaticism. Synchronicities and positive changes should not be treated as supernatural acts, but as signs that the person is finally seeing possibilities that were previously hidden by their own psychic barriers. In this sense, the individual would not be an omnipotent God, capable of editing reality without limits, but a co-creator who operates within a broad set of variables and interactions. Some followers also point to episodes of premonitions, or even glimpses of future events, as demonstrations of this interaction with the double. In the past, only religious figures or shamans were considered capable of predicting disasters or discovering shortcuts in extreme situations. In this approach, everyone has the potential to access insights, as long as they learn to clear fear and maintain attention to messages that spring from something beyond the superficial mind. Some explain, for example, the discoveries of Nikola Tesla and other geniuses as proof of attuning with information that manifested suddenly, almost like flashes from another plane. Doubt about how to empirically validate the action of the quantum double remains on the agenda. Experiments with random number generators, for example, have already indicated that human intention can influence statistics in a subtle way, which suggests some level of mind-matter interaction. However, these tests usually face skepticism or are considered insufficient to confirm the entire framework of time unfolding. Still, they serve as an indication that the mind affects external phenomena in ways that orthodox science has difficulty explaining. In a way, the quantum view breaks with the idea of predetermined destiny. Instead of a fixed script, there would be a probabilistic tangle in which conscious choices, aligned with a well-tuned double, open new trails. This confronts the conception that what is meant to be will be. If this approach is correct, each mental action alters future potentials, and, added to other consciousnesses, generates a continuous flow of possibilities in constant mutation. For some, this is equivalent to liberation from fatalism. For others, it creates discomfort by removing the security of an already traced omniscient plan. In the end, the central lesson is the awareness that the individual needs to cultivate coherence and vigilance. Large groups, rituals, prayers, none of this sustains itself if the person does not take responsibility for their own inner universe. Unfolding time involves the ability to interact actively with potential realities and not just predict or plead for a mystical intervention. It is an invitation to deepen into the mind, inviting each one to review prejudices, abandon habits that foster anguish or arrogance, and understand that, at the quantum level, we all share a field of permanent exchange. Thus, many suggest that, if this knowledge spread on a large scale, we would experience a silent revolution in which each human being recognizes their power of influence, dispensing with guardianships and assuming part of the command over their own life. It is still controversial whether this vision is utopian or achievable. What is certain is that, although invisible, the quantum double can exert real influence, such as physical phenomena that we do not see but feel. Whether people are willing to test and develop this aspect, rather than clinging to reductionist explanations about mind and universe, remains to be seen. The everyday implications of the quantum double shed new light on individual and collective conduct. One of the first perceptions is that it breaks the idea that thoughts remain isolated, without echo in the environment. If each fear or intention reverberates in a shared fabric, it becomes urgent to recognize that we are not immune to the consequences of our mental emissions. This changes the posture of those who previously maintained total passivity or attributed exclusive responsibility to external entities. In this sense, substantial transformations of attitude can occur. Some view this perception as an opportunity for inner growth. Suppose fear and insecurity are waves that contaminate the context. In that case, it becomes vital to identify them and work to dissolve them, both for one's own benefit and for the balance of everyone around. One who adopts a skeptical or pessimistic posture, for example, begins to notice that these vibrations spread and reinforce negative patterns. Understanding this, the person can strive to neutralize such thoughts, seeing this as a kind of necessary mental hygiene for collective harmony. In the philosophical field, the message collides with doctrines that preach radical passivity. Very rigid religious perspectives, which teach mere acceptance of any fact imposed by the divine will, may react with estrangement when learning that, according to the quantum double, each one participates in what manifests. Some think that this borders on arrogance, the human being judging himself a modulator of reality. In compensation, the idea here is less arrogance and more recognition that we are immersed in an information system, and that will is not an isolated whim, but an intrinsic element to this system. Discussions about broad social events, such as political conflicts, wars, or humanitarian campaigns, also arise. Could it be that, by aligning constructive thoughts in a genuine way, people could slow down mass destructive processes? Groups dedicated to collective meditations argue that, if the level of coherence is high, the probability of hostilities decreases. Skeptics, on the other hand, argue that it is a romantic view, as the majority is not willing to go through a deep process of internal cleansing before participating. The time unfolding theory, then, functions more as a warning. Without this individual preparation, large groups can generate noise and even aggravate conflicts instead of resolving them. In more immediate dimensions, such as family and professional relationships, understanding the quantum double can have a notable impact. Many begin to observe if their own emotional blockages or behavior patterns, even silent ones, influence the dynamics of those nearby. Ancient traditions suggest that parents and children, spouses, or close friends create vibrational links that go beyond physical coexistence. The time unfolding model reinforces that these links would be embedded in the information field, where everything connects to some degree. Thus, by changing personal beliefs and emotions, some perceive positive reflections in the environment, even without resorting to explicit speeches or attempts at persuasion. Another delicate issue is the role of large religious or educational institutions. Many of them organize collective prayers, devotional acts, and practices that seek to attract good fortune or divine protection. In the view of the quantum double, none of this is irrelevant. However, if such celebrations mainly feed the fear of punishment or insecurity about the future, they end up reinforcing the anxiety of those who participate. This result can be the opposite of what was intended. On the other hand, environments that promote freedom of internal investigation can be effective in awakening a sense of responsibility, contributing to real transformation. In parallel, discussions arise about phenomena often considered paranormal, telepathy, precognition, visions. For the orthodox scientific majority, all of this lacks objective evidence and remains in the exotic field. However, followers of time unfolding correlate such phenomena with the ability to access this great repository of information that is not limited to the common timeline. If several events coexist in potential, some minds can capture anticipated pieces, especially in situations of high emotional charge. It is also speculated that authorities from different spheres benefit from keeping the masses ignorant about their real power of co-creation. If people do not know how much they influence the plot of events, they remain more manipulable and trapped in structures that present themselves as saviors or exclusive interpreters of truth. Therefore, some see in the quantum double a kind of liberation tool, as it does not require formal intermediation nor blind obedience to doctrines. In summary, the implications of the quantum double go beyond a mere curiosity about how to manifest desires. In a broader perspective, entrenched concepts about how the world works, about to what extent free will is real, and about what our share of participation in the general conjuncture would be, are questioned. For some, this brings hope in the possibility of each person acting in a more lucid and cooperative way. For others, it sounds like daydreaming, as most of the population still lives at a dispersed level of consciousness. In any scenario, the key idea is that each mental emission creates potentials, and that assuming this fact can be the initial step to assume one's own co-authorship of destiny with maturity and without magical illusions. Reflection on the quantum double and time unfolding shakes consolidated certainties about destiny, personal strength, and the essence of what we call spirituality. The essential point is not just in collecting hypotheses or formalizing rituals, but in each one, honestly evaluating what they feed in their own mind and what echoes it projects. When we accept that our mental flow is not an innocuous phenomenon, we can rethink whether it is wise to wait for some external power to solve everything, or if we should take action to realign what we think and feel. For many, the skeptical posture will continue to be valid, which is understandable. Still, even those who doubt completely may be surprised to notice how the time unfolding approach offers explanations for coincidences and synchronicities that the conventional look dismisses. Instead of suggesting adherence to a dogma, the proposal walks in the direction of self-responsibility. It is not about enthroning the ego and declaring that each individual can do everything, but recognizing that each mind influences and is influenced by the whole. The question that remains concerns the willingness of each person to recognize this co-authorship. Remaining in passivity may be more comfortable, as it involves delegating the resolution of challenges to distant entities or authorities. However, this alternative is usually accompanied by a feeling of powerlessness. When time unfolding exposes that there are gaps for the creation of new realities, this comfort of conformism is shaken. The idea that there is no definitive border between what is imagined and what can become real proposes a path that requires courage, as it places us before ourselves. I believe that this is the main invitation of this video, to dare to face the fact that will, conscious or not, shapes circumstances. The quantum double does not promise miracles nor seek to replace religious views. It proposes an innovative reading about the gear of time, space, and thought, in which potentials are not mere daydreams, but something that pulses and influences countless trajectories, including our own. Every change begins with understanding your role as a co-creator, and the only way to connect with this divine intelligence is through meditation. We have developed a set of audio tools to help you access this higher state of consciousness. To learn more and get immediate access, click the link on the screen or in the comments. If this video resonated with you, write in the comments, "It made sense to me."